along to what should be the first instalment of a Highlanders story. So the guests I have today, I'll let them introduce yourself. So could you start by introducing yourself, give me your name, where you're from and your rank when you left?
My name is Dougie Shepherd. I come from South Queensferry originally and joined the Seaforth National Service in 1956.
So what was life like in Scotland at that time in 1956? A lot of people watching this will have never seen 56 or 66 even.
Yeah, it was. I've got the fondest memories. I've got the best memories of my childhood. I was brought up with my grandmother in Queensferry. Times were hard. I was born in 1938, so I lived through the war in Queensferry, brought up with my grandmother, and I can only say that I had the best of childhoods.
So 38, so actually Queensferry would have been a reasonable target at that time because of all the naval movements.
Yes, yeah? Absolutely. I can remember, I think it must have been the night of the Clydebank raids.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
When the German bombers went over. And we didn't have our own individual air raid shelter, but my aunt lived across the road. And they had a Morrison shelter in their back garden. And crammed into that shelter was me, my brother, my grandmother, my aunt, my uncle, and a cousin. So there was six of us in this very small Morrison air raid shelter.
That must have been fun.
It was cosy. Well, at the age I was then, it was. I suppose we looked on it as an adventure and a wee bit of fun.
Yeah, being that. Do you have any military background in your family?
Almost none, but strangely enough, in our house we had an Uncle Joe. Now, Uncle Joe was not family, but he had come back from the First World War, having served in Palestine, I think, with a Queensferry man. He had nowhere to stay, and my granny took him in as a lodger, and he lived with us for the rest of his life. And he was a Seaforth Highlander of all things.
All right. So presumably you did national service, yeah?
Yes.
So when you were actually getting near that age of 18,
yes,
did it fill you with dread? Did you quite look forward to it? What were your feelings about that time, having to join the military?
Yep.
No choice.
Well, at that time, I suppose I must have been 17 when I left school, and I sat the civil service exam and became a civil servant for a short time before I was eventually called up in July, on July the 7th, 1956. I don't know how I looked forward. I don't know if I looked forward to it or not. I think I'd always been a reasonably adventurous sort of laddie, and it didn't come as a great surprise to join the army.
Was there an option then of you had to do some military service?
I had to go and do my national service.
Yeah, but was there an option to Navy, Air Force, Army, or were you selected for which? Can you remember?
I actually can't remember. I think there was a piece of paper which said which branch of the service do you want to join, and I put down Army, any particular part of the Army, and I know that I put down any Scottish regiment, and ended up in the Seaforth at Fort George.
So you did your 2 years?
Yes.
Left?
Back to the civil service, perchance? Went back to the civil service.
So what drew you right back into the army then?
Well, I went back into the civil service, and started to be reasonably successful at this. But no, it wasn't for me. What I did then, strangely enough, I went back to Germany. you know what they say about women? Women will draw you quicker than gunpowder will blow you.
Yeah.
And I had left a German girlfriend behind when I left the army, and I went back to Germany and worked as a civilian in Munster. I was a bricklayer. I mixed cement. I carried cement. I did all sorts of things. My regiment was still in this. This was in Munster. My regiment was still in Munster, but I got a wee bit fed up of carting cement around, so I just walked up to the barracks one day and said, "I'm Corporal Shepherd." There was a few people around who recognised me. I'm ex-Corporal Shepherd, and I want to join up. But I didn't want to go back to Fort George to do my training again.
Right.
So, and I think it was a lieutenant or a captain, Mike White, who was the adjutant. He said, "Well, we can't just do it like that, Mr. Shepherd. Come back and see us next week." And I went back a week later, signed there, he said. And that was it. I was in.
You were in. And that, you were Seaforth?
I was a Seaforth.
So was there any particular significance to the Seaforths rather than any other regiment?
No,
was there a reason why you were drawn there?
Originally, I had just put down on a piece of paper, any Scottish regiment.
Yeah.
And that's where I ended up.
But when you signed on, for the second time, basically, after you'd done your national service, back into the Seaforth?
It was easy for me because, as I said, the Seaforth Highlanders were still serving in Munster. I had left them on the mob in Munster, and when I eventually went back to Munster, they were still there in the same barracks.
Right, so that was the draw rather than any particular affiliation from your family?
No,
yeah.
I wanted to go back there.
Is there anything you remember about your basic training in national service, anything that particularly sticks out to you?
In basic training at national service? No, I enjoyed every bit of my basic training. I'm not sure that applies to everybody, and I enjoyed every single bit of it. I was as strong as a young bull. I had worked on a farm during school holidays and things like that. So I was ready for it physically. And I enjoyed all the aspects of my basic training. I had learned to shoot from my father, and I ended up being the best rifle shot and the best machine gun shot during my training. So shooting came naturally to me, and I had no problems with that whatsoever. The physical side of it, not a problem. There is a lot of talking nowadays about bullying. I never observed anything whatsoever that resembled bullying. The corporals who were instructing me, the sergeants and sergeant majors, and I say now, but these sergeants and corporals, sergeants and sergeant majors who were responsible for my training, they all had 2 and 3 rows of medals up here. They had been through the fire, and they were tough and they were hard, but they were fair, and I enjoyed every single minute of my military training, especially the shooting aspect. In fact, everything that was involved in my basic training, I enjoyed.
Yes, I mean, I suppose part of it might be some of the conscripts who obviously had no choice on the national service. You had to do your 2 years, and I don't know how many others you did it with who were just going through national service.
Yeah.
Any reluctant soldiers amongst them? That's where I thought maybe that some of this aspect of bullying talks
There
about.
were obviously the odd 1 or 2, and I'll call them semi-reluctant soldiers among them. I don't remember anybody getting chucked out. The trainers persevered with them. They were reluctant to chuck anybody out. There was such a thing as what they called back squadding.
Yes.
And if you were perhaps a bit slower than everybody else, then they did back squad you. They let Everybody else was let to go on, and you were held back for the next squad,
Yep.
and you started again. But no, everything about my training was good. I enjoyed it.
It's remarkable that at that time, people just starting probably their professional careers, etc., then being called into the military in some form. But the aspect of these people who trained you are dealing with every level of intelligence. I'll call it intelligence of people with different backgrounds.
You are absolutely, you've hit it spot on, George. The good thing about this business in national services, you were in there, you were a clerk, you were a bricklayer, you were a labourer, you were a gamekeeper, you were anything of a whole multitude of jobs. And it really was it was a good learning being involved with all these different people.
Here's something that I experienced myself, right, as a central belter. Can you remember the first time you put a kilt on?
Oh, well, I remember roughly, if I joined up on the 7th, if I arrived at Fort George on the 7th of July, 1956, I must have been issued with my uniform round about in my first week of training, and I can remember well. It had a nickname. It was the beef bag. That's what it was called. But I remember it well. I look forward to it. You know, look in the mirror. Look at me. Don't I look wonderful?
Yeah, no, I can remember that experience myself. And you said the first posting was Munster.
First posting was Gibraltar.
All right, sorry, I picked you up wrong.
No.
Yeah, how did that go?
Oh, this is, you know, I'm going up. I've never been. I don't think I'd been across the border in my life. All of a sudden, I was heading for Gibraltar, and I remember one particular aspect to this. Training's finished. We're leaving Fort George, and we're heading for the troop train that's going to take us down to London, wherever it was. And there was a whole gang of ex-regulars, because this was the time of the Suez Crisis.
Oh yeah.
In autumn 1956, and this was a whole gang of ex-regulars who were going back to the regiment to serve in case there was anything going to happen out in Suez. And I remember getting as far as Coatbridge. We had got on the train in Inverness. We got as far as Coatbridge, and these two guys says, "Well, stuff this, we're off," and they just jumped off the train. History doesn't tell us what happened to them because I never ever saw them again.
So what about some of the more memorable places that you've been? Can you describe some of them? I presume you did Singapore, Brunei, Northern Ireland, Hong Kong,
yes,
Germany,
yes,
UK.
yes,
Did you go to the Falklands?
yes.
So all of that. Would you like to describe some of that? Some of them, the memorable. I mean, I can imagine what the Falklands would be like after
Yes,
that conflict there.
There was obviously a lot of. You've just mentioned some of the places that I've been. There was a lot of highlights. The Falklands was obviously one of the big highlights, and it was. This was a serious business.
Yes.
The Falklands. Fortunately, we went down. We must have been one of the first units to travel on a cruise ship. I'll call it a cruise ship. It wasn't really, it was a cross-channel ferry. But these ferries were called stuffed ships. That's S-T-U-F-T, and that's for ships taken up from trade. Because I think in that era, the era of troop ships had gone.
Yes.
Like, say, for instance, when we went to Singapore in 1961, we went on the HMT Navassa, Her Majesty's troop ship Navassa. That era had gone. So to get the army to the Falklands, They just took up ships from trade. The QE2, for example, we went on a, oh dear me, it was a cross-channel ferry, the Norland.
The Norland it was.
So we headed off to war on a ferry boat. that was an adventure in itself. No, the Falklands was a real adventure. But when you've got all this great myriad of wonderful places that I was fortunate enough to go to, I think the one that really sticks out in my mind is Berlin.
Yeah.
Hong Kong was great, loved every minute of it. Singapore was great, loved it. Big adventure in Brunei and Borneo. But Berlin, for me, was a wee bit special. And if you say to me, why was it special? It was an extremely interesting city. It was, at that time, it was a divided city. I was fortunate enough at that time to be the reconnaissance platoon sergeant, and part of my job almost daily was to go up and down the wire, patrolling and whatever. So that was an interesting aspect. But apart from that, the city itself was a really, and you would say to yourself, how's that? It was a really vibrant city. Although it was a divided city, certainly our side of the wire was very vibrant. And I take my hat off to the Berliners, the civilian population. They lived their lives well and happily. But and for that for that interesting reason, I would put Berlin. Folk would say, well, Hong Kong must be great. So and Singapore, well, they were, but I would put Berlin at the top of the tree.
I've thoroughly enjoyed Berlin, and the Berliners themselves, with what you were saying. I remember being invited out at Christmas and New Year to their homes.
Yes.
They opened their homes to us for all those guys who couldn't get away or weren't married, didn't have their family with them. They opened their homes, invited us in, and said, "Come and join us." I found that, consider the Second World War wasn't that long before it, certainly well within their memories. To do that, I thought was remarkable.
And if I look at this television programs that we see almost weekly or monthly, say, on television nowadays about Berlin immediately after the war, I look at it now and I say, this is fantastic. It was flat. It flattened at the end of the war.
Yep.
And now what have they done? I think it's fantastic what they've done.
Yeah, I went on holiday there just a few years ago. Absolutely transformed.
Yeah,
transformed the whole place. It's brilliant. The other thing I was going to, what about Anduki?
Pardon?
Anduki?
No, I did not land at Anduki.
No?
And this is one of the hairiest thing, if I can call it that, one of the hairiest things I did during my military service. When the Brunei thing blew up, I travelled out there on a Hastings aircraft. Our barracks at Selarang in Singapore was only about a mile away from Changi Airport, which is in Singapore. And we went down to Changi, got on these 4-engined, Hastings aircraft, and we flew to the island of Labuan. The island of Labuan, which is just off the northwest coast of Borneo. Having flown to Labuan, we got further briefed on what was going on. And the next thing that happened is these wee aeroplanes arrived on the scene, and they were twin-engined Pioneers, and we used to call it TWA, which used to stand for in these days Trans World Airways.
Yep.
We called it Teeny Weeny Airways, and we literally bundled ourselves into these aircraft and took off. Where the hell are we going? And I don't know how the RAF operate like that, But the guy who was driving this aeroplane was a wing commander. And this is a teeny weeny aeroplane. I'm saying to myself, what's a wing commander doing driving this aeroplane? And anyway, right, where are we going? And our briefings continued during the flight. And we're heading for a place west of Syria. And all of a sudden, a green light goes on, thumbs up from the front of the aircraft to the RAF guy who was in charge. And he's going like that. We're going, and I looked out the window. And all I could see was a golf course. I said, wait a wee minute. This is no right. There's something no right here. Is this aeroplane all right? Anyway, this wing commander landed this plane full of soldiers on a golf course. Can you imagine it? It was like being at the fair. And I dodge him. And you're in and out, the putting greens, in and out the bunkers, up the fairway. Oh, this is, wait a minute, it was this
Yeah.
was the fair. This was the fair. We were only too pleased to get out of that aeroplane, I can tell you.
No, I mean, I know there was some hairy stories for that time. You remember Andy Duncan?
Big Andy, yes.
Yes, he recounted numerous stories about that and how they got on. But they rolled out the planes. The plane actually didn't stop, if I recall Andy correctly. They actually rolled out of them. I don't know how. They rolled out of them. They actually, the aircraft didn't stop. It just kept. I mean, it slowed down as it hit whatever runway it was on, and they get out of the thing.
You'll forgive me if I wander on a wee bit at this stage.
Not at all.
But we got out of this aeroplane. I was in 3 platoon, which was actually commanded by Second Lieutenant Mackenzie, who went on to be a full general and commanded the regiment actually later on in life. But like all young officers, I suppose, was quite foolhardy sort of thing, and get over there, get yourself in fire positions, this, that, next thing. And I can remember saying to him, "Hi, sir, there's a guy shooting at us out there." That's true, this guy was shooting. It's at no time we were doing something about it. Anyway, that was all cleared up. And off we went up the road. I was in 3 platoon, 2 platoon went in and attacked it was the Sultan's Palace. And our first stop was up the road at the telecommunications exchange, where that in fact is where Mr. Mackenzie, as he was then, got a wee lump shot off his ear when he was racing past this window of this telecommunications exchange, and this guy stuck a gun out and fired it and blew a lump off his ear. But no, it didn't take too long for us to sort the whole thing out.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, the survivors themselves, even some had written later on in life, the children in particular, who said they can remember the rescue vividly and being picked up by Queen's Own Highlanders.
Well, that's very interesting that you're saying this, George. Just this very morning, I was going through some papers, of which I have too many up the stairs. And among these papers was a letter from this lady in Virginia, USA. And it was a letter, she had picked up something about me from somewhere. I don't know where she got my address or anything like that. But it was to the effect that she was 5 years old when the other part of the battalion flew into Anduki.
Yeah.
And they attacked the, whatever you call it. Anyway, there's something at Anduki that the air control tower. They attacked the air control tower, and that was that, sorted out. But in the meantime, there were hostages, British and Dutch hostages who were involved in the oil business out there, were down in Syria, and her father was shot dead on her 5th birthday.
Yes.
And this lady had taken the time to write to me, as I say, how she got my name from where I've got no idea, but she was very clear that the Highlanders had done a magnificent job when they were there.
Yeah.
But, you know, and there she was, only too happy to, you know, to give me her thoughts on the Queen's Own Highlanders,
Yeah.
who, in fact, there was a book written about, and I gave it to somebody. It was called The Undeclared War, which gave you the Brunei story. And the author of that book said, it was quite a telling phrase. McHardy, because it was Colonel McHardy who was the commanding officer. McHardy's Highlanders were magnificent. And I thought, yes, that's got a nice ring to it.
It certainly has. You obviously went through the ranks. So
Yep.
what would you say were sort of main challenges that you faced doing that?
Aye. I should maybe say no. But I'll say aye. My main challenges as I went through the ranks, first big step is when you get into the sergeant's mess.
Yep.
That was the really first big step. My most challenging job, the job which I enjoyed most of all the jobs I ever done or ever did, right through to the rank of major, was company sergeant major. I was company sergeant major of B Company, which I named the Bonnie Bee. I was the company sergeant major, and it was the best appointment I ever had in my life. I was the company sergeant major to Colonel David Blair, who was eventually killed while in command in Northern Ireland.
Yep.
I learned more about the army during the 2 years that I was there. I have got a nice story to tell about him, actually. When I was in Belize, I was the company sergeant major of the Bonnie Bee there, and I got myself, everybody used to get these T-shirts printed, and I got this T-shirt printed, and on it I was the company sergeant major, I had Bravo Boss. And I was walking past the company commander's door this day. He said, Sergeant Major, can I have a minute, please? And I said, what's all this business, Sergeant Major, this Bravo Boss? I said, sir, don't worry about it. For me, you will always be Bravo leader. And he looked at me and said, I quite like that. Thank you. And that was it.
What actually drove you to take on more responsibility, Dougie? To do that, to go up through the ranks? I mean, promotion doesn't just happen. You really need to drive yourself.
Well, I'm sure it doesn't just happen. Somebody somewhere has noticed you.
Yeah.
And, well, I suppose it starts at the very beginning. You know, you've got to sort of prove yourself all the way through. I mean, I remember when I was a young corporal, I went to the school of infantry at
Warminster?
no, it was the small arms
Small
arms school corps at Hythe.
Hythe.
I went there and I got an A grading at Hythe, and these sort of things all helped as you went through. If you met the targets, then you got your rewards.
Did your perspective change when you got to the rank of Major, the soldiering? Did it change? You know, from being a non-commissioned officer to an officer, did your perspective on what the military was or how things were done?
No. I'm going to say no. That is an unequivocal no for me. I personally found the transition from a warrant officer class 2, company sergeant major, to that of they don't make you a major immediately. I started off with 2 pips on my shoulder, and they made me a lieutenant. And certainly the perspective of going from being a ranker to be an officer Well, I think I knew my regiment quite well, and I knew the people well who were sitting further up the tree. Uh, and I found it quite an easy transition from being a warrant officer class to being an officer. The officers' mess was a lot of great fun. Here was I, at the age of 43, suddenly arriving in this officers' mess at 11 o'clock. I forget what day it was, in September 1981, I think. Arrived there at 11, and all these young second lieutenants, if I was 43, they would be 21, something like that, all waiting to greet this old smelly. Well, if I was an old smelly then, it didn't take me long to lose this name tag once I joined this lot.
So taking that on a little bit, what would you say was your proudest moment then in the military?
My proudest moment,
What made you most proud, yeah?
I'm not a very proud person. I hope not. My proudest moment. Oh, dearie me. Well, I've got to wrap it all up in this company sergeant major thing.
Right.
I was a very proud company sergeant major to be the company sergeant major of the Bonnie Bee, with a company commander like David Blair, from whom I learned more about the army in his very short command, the B Company of 2 years, being commissioned.
Yeah.
It wasn't it was just another, oh, it was the final stop. It was just the final stop along the road for me. I enjoyed every aspect of my military life. As a lance corporal, as a corporal in charge of an anti-tank detachment, as a reconnaissance platoon sergeant, as a company sergeant major, I enjoyed everything I did in the military. It wasn't as if I sat back there and said to myself, "Oh, I can't fed up with this. I can't be bothered with this." I enjoyed every single aspect of my career all the way through.
Makes life a lot easier.
Pardon?
That makes life a lot easier.
Well,
Yes.
that does make it easier.
Yeah. Was there any particular moment in time when your leadership was really tested?
When my leadership was tested.
Yeah.
Jigs. My leadership was tested. I'm not going to, tested is the wrong word. I had two particular instances when two laddies in my company, whom I knew well, or just as well as I knew every single one of them well in my company. But one of them was, let me get this right, a Guy Robertson. Lovely wee man, came from Skye, went on leave, didn't come back. Oh, she's bugging it. What? I said, what the hell's going on here? Anyway, what happened next was there was a letter arrived from a very influential person on the island of the Skye, and I'll leave it like that, saying, "Can you please excuse Robbie's absence? He's had to work on the farm." And I looked at this, I said, "Oh no, what am I going to do?" Anyway, I went into the boss, Colonel Blair, or Major Blair as he was. I said, "Sir, you better have a look at that." I had a look at it. "Sergeant Major, what do you think?" Then he said to me, "What do you think?" I said, "Sir, Robertson is not a bad fellow. And this person has said that she will have him back immediately." And of course that happened. He came back. But no sooner did he come back than there was another fellow who went on leave and failed to come back. And what happens this time? His father writes a poem. Dear Company Sergeant Major, I'm very sorry that Colin hasn't returned, but everything's in order and he will be back within the next 48 hours. And lo and behold, Colin appeared. But David Blair and I sat down and had a wee talk about this one, about Colin G and wee Robbie. I said, now look, sir, I said, the world's not going to fall apart. These two laddies are two good laddies. Let's just play it by ear just now and see how we go on. And I was quite pleased that it worked. I mean, I could quite easily have went bloody berserk and said, lock them up forever.
Looking back on it, and your time in the Queensland Highlanders, etc., how did that shape you as a person?
I don't think it certainly did not affect me as a person radically. I would like to think that I left the army the way I had found it. It had met all my expectations. Loved every minute of it, and I think, as I said already, if I had to do all again, I would make all the same mistakes again, because it was great fun making these mistakes, and the army gave me a great sense of fun.
What do you think, the younger generation today, being what it is, what do you think they don't fully understand about life as a soldier now, or then? Sorry.
What do they not fully understand? It would be nice. I don't know how you get them to. I don't know how you get them to understand. It seems, we've been sitting here talking, and it seems to have been quite easy for me, which it was, because I had looked forward to it so very much. But how would I get them to understand? I think that's for others in the recruiting chain to try and answer. I don't think I can answer that. If you're asking me in general, what would I do? Well, I had a job I had at one time. I was what was called a schools liaison officer.
Right. And
my job was to go to, I think I did this job for about a year. And my job was to go and visit schools. And not from a recruiting aspect at all, just to tell them what my experience was of the military. Now, whether we still have appointments like this in the army, I don't know. I would just like to think that they are reasonable appointments to get people to understand what the military is like. They weren't without incident. I remember I went to a school not very far from where we're sitting here now in Upall, and I introduced myself to the secretary at the school, who took me through and introduced me to the head teacher, and the head teacher was very nice, but I knew enough by this time, or I thought I knew enough by this time, to just be quite carrying with my responses to what anything coming my way. And this lady said, that she was a female, the head teacher, she says, Mr. Shepherd, are you a local man? I said, yes, I'm reasonably local. I went, she said, where did you go to school? Now, I should perhaps, I think I can say this on camera. This was St. Kentigern's in school in Blackburn. Was it Blackburn? Yes, it was Blackburn. And her name was Miss McCabe. She said, where did you go to school? Oh, I said, I went to school at Bathgate Academy. And she sort of, was it a good school? I said, absolutely excellent school. Oh, that's good to hear. Any memories of that school? I said, yes. I said, we had a great rivalry with the school along the road, St. Mary's, just along the road, St. Mary's Academy. Oh yes, she said she brightened up a wee bit at this. And I said, and the only thing I remember about this was that the headmaster at St Mary's, he was a bit of an old devil. And she looked at me, she says, careful, Captain Shepard, you're speaking about my father. So that was a wee bit of clanger I dropped, but the point I'm trying to get across was that that was a job which I enjoyed. It was a job which I thought I could put across quite well, and I think that's probably as good a way as any as answering your question. Schools liaison officers, I think, were a valuable link in the chain.
Now, you still stay in touch with former members of the regiment through the association, etc. How important is that for you today?
How important has it been to me personally? I would like to think that my association with former members of the regiment, my association with our regimental association, I've looked on this as giving something back. Anything which I ever achieved in life, a lot of it was down to my regiment. No, I'll start at the beginning. A lot of it was down to my school. A lot of it was down to my regiment. A lot of it was down to my comrades, most of, or many of whom I see regularly. So I think I've got much to be grateful for in my association with the regiment.
Now, given all that, what would you say to any young Scot today who's thinking about joining the military, the army in particular, of course?
Oh, I would say go for it. Go for it. You don't need to stay forever. If after, I think, I may be wrong in saying this, I think it might be 3 years now. If after 3 years you say, no, enough is enough, no, this isn't for me, then that is fine. But some of it will have been rubbed off on you.
Yep.
The discipline involved will have rubbed off on you, for example.
Is there any one member in particular that would say truly defines your experience as a Highlander? Is there any one particular thing that's,
Dearie me.
this is me?
Any one experience that I will remember? Yeah. Well, obviously, active service in Brunei. I will always remember that. I will remember, well, of course I will. I will remember places like Berlin, Hong Kong, Singapore. And there was another one I was going to mention there, Canada, the Falklands. No, I just looked on the whole, or I sit here now and just reflect on the whole military thing, it was good for me. And I like to think now that I give a wee bit back now and again.
No, I would say you do more than that, especially in regards to, you're a storyteller on Facebook. You know, your stories are quite remarkable, and your actually memory of time and events is much better than mine could ever be. I don't know how you do it, but
well, I'm trying to think what it was, but I've done. Rachel gets, as you know, George. Yes. Rachel does all the computing stuff in this house. But I did something for her this morning. What the hell was it? My latest latest anecdote. They're not all 100% true. They're 90-odd% true. I've just remembered that the latest one this morning was about a company commander, a lovely company commander, and a company sergeant major who was a lovely company sergeant major. You shouldn't describe that. I don't suppose you should describe a company sergeant major as being lovely, but Weary Willie was lovely, and his company commander Graham was lovely, and we were doing morning press-ups, early morning PT in Belize about 6 o'clock in the morning. And when it was finished, what we call the QMSI, the guy who was in charge, or a muscle bender, the guy who was in charge of the PT, says like, what was it? Well, we finished with press up. And when the press ups were finished, he says, on your feet, up. And there were 2 people still lying at the horizontal on the grass. One of them was the company commander, and the other one was the company sergeant major, and they were both fast asleep. That is a true story.
Not nice one. I mean, I know you've got a bundle of them. Dougie, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this morning. Hope you enjoyed it as well. Finally, we decided to call these interviews a Highlander story.
Right.
Does that seem fair and reasonable?
That seems fair enough to me, yes.
Yeah. We weren't quite sure, but then we were all Highlanders of some sort, whether it was Seaforth Highlanders,
Yes.
Cameron Highlanders, Queen's Own Highlanders. So a Highlander story, I thought, was a reasonable title to go with. Yeah.
It is for many reasons. I remember when we used to do drill parades. We had company drill parades, which I would take my company on drill. The regimental sergeant major would take a battalion drill parade. And the commanding officer, he would also take a drill parade, very seldom, but if we were building up to a big event. And he always addressed us as Highlanders. As a company sergeant major, I would say, company, shut. The regimental sergeant major would say, battalion, shut. And if the commanding officer was taking the parade, it would be Highlanders, shut. And that's just got a wee bit of a ring to it.
Yeah, I agree. Dougie, thanks again. Thank you.
It was, George, this was quite good fun. I quite enjoyed this.
Good to hear.
Maybe I'm a wee bit too much of a reminiscer, but
No, certainly not.
it was, and I will continue to relate these stories on the regimental Facebook page. I'm not going to say tell the odd lie. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
I think the newspapers take that up.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
I hope you're going to edit that though. Wait a minute, I can't say that.